Good morning, rock stars, and welcome back to String and Story. My name is Holly Ann Knight, and it's my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. Welcome back to another live Q&A for our Star Island quilt along. This is a little bit of a different setup than I'd been hoping for, but then again, this whole week has been an exercise in flexibility. So we are going to jump in together. We're going to talk a little bit about quilt assembly and basting this morning in preparation for our custom quilting masterclass this evening. I am so excited that our masterclass will be going on as scheduled. I was very nervous at the beginning of the week that we were going to have to move it back. But as y'all know, I did test negative this morning. I am feeling so much better. And y'all have sent me the kindest messages. So thank you so much for your encouragement. It was a bumpy couple of days there. I will say I'm just so thankful that even though I did get sick and it was really awful for a couple of days, it has passed quickly. So huzzah, we are here. We're going to do the dang thing. Now, if you are new around here or have not watched a whole lot of lives, you may be thinking, that's not the shop behind you. And you would be correct. So I'm actually in my home studio. This is, we call it the Sloft. Sometimes that stands for sewing loft. Sometimes that stands for she loft. Basically, all of my happy things live up here. So I'm in between the Pelotons and I'm at my sewing table. And I was working from home this morning because we had a terrible rainstorm roll through. And it was kind of one of those moments of like getting everything packed up from being homesick and getting over to the shop was not the most efficient way to get ready to be with you this morning. So if you are here, do say hi in the chat. Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, Laura. Good morning, Jan. Good morning, Christy. I saw Alyssa. I hope you are recovering well as well. We will miss you tomorrow, Alyssa, but we will see you hopefully next week. Good morning, Karen, Raina, Sandy. I see a whole bunch of y'all. How are you? And hopefully all of my friends who also got COVID at H&H, hopefully y'all are on the mend as well. Good morning, Jen. All right. As I mentioned, we are going to talk basting this morning. I am down to the wire on getting my Star Island blocks together. So you can see I've got the body of the block is put together. I'm obsessed with these guys. And then I actually have my sashing piece as well. I'm going to floss these apart here in just a moment. So I have everything, all the sashing pieces. Look how cute those are all in a row like that. So I just have to put these on the blocks and then get my top together. Oh my gosh, Alyssa, you're hoping you can make it tomorrow? Yes. Just be very careful. Be very careful, please. Okay. Okay. Sidebar from So Long for a second, guys. Alyssa, Sip and Sew. We still have seats tomorrow. So if you have a friend who can drive you, that could also be an option. I'm just saying. Okay. Whitney, hi. All right. So I am down to the wire. As you can imagine, the goal would have been for this quilt to already be basted because we are literally quilting it live tonight. But in lieu of that, we're just going to be down to the wire. There's no crunch like a sewing crunch, right? Tonight, as I mentioned, we are going to have our custom quilting masterclass. So I have drawn a gorgeous, if I do say so myself, custom quilting plan for this. Those of y'all who are watching on Instagram, this link is already up in my stories. Those of you who are over on YouTube, I'm dropping it in the chat. We are going to be live tonight at 8 p.m. And I am going to be custom quilting this on my domestic over at the shop. So I'm about to talk through the basting process. And that's the process that I'm going to be following this afternoon in order to get this quilt ready to actually stitch it with you. So the most important thing with basting is that you are trying to accomplish two goals, okay? One is that you need to temporarily put the layers of your quilt together. So that's going to be your quilt top, your batting, and then your backing. You want to temporarily connect those layers so that you can then quilt them. And that's what's actually going to hold all the layers together forever and ever, amen, or until you love your quilts to death and they begin to come apart again, as is happening with some of the favorite quilts in my house. There are a couple of ways to do this. Common ways include thread basting, pin basting, and spray basting. Now, personally, I am a spray basting girly, okay? My absolute favorite way, and the way I was really hoping to do for this quilt, is homemade spray based. However, that does take several hours to dry, so I don't know if I'm going to get that lucky this time, okay? I don't know if I'm going to get that lucky, but I'm going to talk you through the process because it's going to be the same whether you're using aerosol spray based or homemade spray based, okay? My favorite is to work on a carpeted surface. Think about like if you went to Sunday school, those felt boards, and sometimes they had them like in primary school classrooms too. But how felt boards stick to one another, it's the same concept as our design wall, right? Y'all can't see my design wall, it blends in back there. But the friction is what holds those layers together. And that's what I like to utilize when I'm basting as well. When I first learned how to baste, I saw all the videos, right, of like spread out on a clean floor and like tape your backing down and then spread your batting and then spread your top. And if you're pinning, you do kind of have to do it that way. You have to layer up bottom to top so you can pass those pins all the way through. But when you're spray basting, you can work on one side and then the other. So I like to spread my batting down as my base layer, and I like to put it on carpet because then I know it's not moving. And it just makes it a lot easier to get it very smooth. If any of y'all want just some like wild entertainment, sometime after lunch, you could come smush your face on the glass at the shop because I'm going to be basting this quilt and it is not carpet in there. So it's going to be really cute. Not cute. It's not going to be cute. Because it's going to slip and slide all over the floor. That's why I prefer to work on carpet. So put that batting down. I usually start with my backing. I spread my backing all out over the batting and I get it totally smooth. I have not put any baste yet. Okay. Once I have everything very, very smooth, I will then fold half of that backing back over itself to re-expose the batting. I like to start with the backing because your backing is usually bigger than your batting. So when it comes time to actually spray the baste, if you just spray the batting, then you can just smooth it all out, right? Once we get over to the other side, we have to think about overspray a little bit more. The other reason that I like homemade spray based when I have the time to use it is that if I accidentally spray beyond the edges of my batting or my fabric, it's just alcohol, flour, and water. So the liquid is going to evaporate, and the next time I vacuum the carpet, that flour is going to get vacuumed up. So I'm not so worried about overspray. Oh, hello, Havana. I'm so sorry. Here I am just like sticking my foot under her leg. She's probably like, what are you doing? But I don't have to be as worried about overspray because I'm not going to end up with a sticky residue, right? If you're working with an aerosol, you do want to give a little bit of thought to that. My favorite is Heat and Bond's Spray and Bond aerosol. I got to meet the folks at Heat and Bond last week at H&H, and I think they were a little taken aback by once I realized like, oh yes, y'all make my favorite spray based, how giddy I was about that. Because that purple and white can, y'all, I find that it has the least gunking effect on my needle. It smells the least, and it doesn't do the whole overspray thing, which is really nice. Okay, so we fold our backing halfway back, spray the batting, spray the fabric. Yes, I spray both because you're going to miss spots. Smooth it out, okay? And I literally do it like that. I start in the middle, straight up to the top, and then I go out to the sides, okay? If you have ever had the blessed experience of having to do bulletin board paper on those big school bulletin boards, it's kind of like that, right? You need to like go up the middle and out to the sides so that you don't end up with bubbles in the middle or it's going to crinkle all semester and make you crazy, okay? Same concept. Then we're going to do the other half of that backing, right? So flip it back on itself, spray, smooth it back out, all right? At this stage, if you're using homemade spray base, you're going to let it dry. Otherwise, you can go ahead and flip it over. And then we essentially repeat that on the other side, except that when I'm spraying the quilt top or when I'm basting the quilt top, I focus my spraying on the top so that I don't end up with a sticky residue on the batting all the way around because then my hands stick to it while I'm quilting. And that's kind of like walking on a floor that has that dried layer of Coke on it, you know, like it just is a little, yeah, you know, so I like to focus on spraying the quilt top for that part and smooth it all out. Then no matter what baste I'm using, whether I am using homemade spray based or I'm using the Heat and Bond spray or another spray, I always put a couple of, I call them mental health pens or sanity pens in. So usually right in the center of the quilt and then a couple kind of out towards the edges, just because heaven forbid I somehow missed some big spot when I was spraying. I want to be able, to know that like things aren't going to spread too far, right? and then I'm ready to quilt, which is really exciting. So Christina asked a question about homemade spray base, which I am going to answer momentarily. But if you, the rest of y'all, if you have questions about basting, about homemade spray base, please put those in the chat. Would love to answer them for you. Christina said, how long can you store the homemade spray base? Months? Years? Okay. Multiple answers to this. So in terms of storing it for efficacy, like will it still work? Weeks to months. Okay. What's going to happen over time with the homemade spray base is the flour and the salt are going to settle to the bottom. The alcohol and water are going to rise to the top, and eventually they're going to evaporate, right? So it's going to get progressively thicker. So at some point, there's not going to be enough liquid in there for it to work. Now, if you've stored it for a couple of weeks and just a little bit of that has evaporated, a good shake, it might still be liquid enough to use, or you could top it off with a little extra alcohol and again, shake it up really well. If you have stored it for a whole lot longer than that, you're going to want to just clean the container out and then start over. So I would say weeks to like maybe up to 6 weeks that it's still going to work and be good. That being said, I absolutely have a spray bottle at the shop that is presently full of homemade spray base that I made recently. But prior to that, I had let it sit for probably 2 years because I don't think I'd used homemade spray base since I opened the shop because I don't have carpeting and can't just leave stuff out in the middle of the floor for 2 days, right? And I will say at no point did it ever grow anything, ever, because it has that rubbing alcohol or crafting vodka in it. So the nice thing is you don't need to worry about it becoming like a weird biohazard, but at some point it's going to thicken enough that it's no longer useful. Does that make sense, Christina? So that is my recommendation there. I would say up to about 6 weeks that it's still going to be useful. Again, because it's just flour and liquid, it's very easy to clean that container out and start fresh, which is really great. And it's inexpensive. So I really enjoy that as well, that if I don't use a whole batch of homemade spray base before I feel like it's past its prime, I don't feel like I've wasted a lot of resources because it's just a little bit of flour and alcohol, right? And for those of you who have asked, I get questions all the time about, is the flour going to attract bugs to my quilt? I've never had that problem. And y'all, I have that Star Island quilt, a perpetual demonstration that lives at the shop that I've been quilting on for videos off and on for 5 years. And it is basted with homemade spray base and it has not had any bug issues. So I have field tested the flour factor, have not had problems. Yes, it's all going to wash out after you finish quilting your quilt and you wash your quilt. You can use gluten-free flour. Rice flour works. It has enough of that sticky element to it that it's going to make it stick. You can use rubbing alcohol or you can use crafting vodka. So I've had questions both directions. For those who are on a sober journey, please use rubbing alcohol. I do not want temptation in your house. I want you to maintain your sobriety. We support that wholly for you. For those of you who are concerned about the smell of rubbing alcohol, the super cheap vodka, bottom of the shelf plastic bottle really should not be for human consumption anyway. That works beautifully and it doesn't have that rubbing alcohol smell to it. Wendy says, what's the longest you can leave a quilt between spray basting and actually quilting? Well, based on the Star Island quilt that is still only about maybe a quarter of the way quilted and it is still thoroughly basted together, I'm going to go with like 5 years plus. Like I said, I have inadvertently thoroughly field tested this. Also, in case any of y'all needed to like not feel bad about leaving a quilt basted for some horrifyingly long period of time, I have one that's been sitting semi-quilted for 1 million years. So here we are. Great questions, y'all. I love those questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss any. Good morning, Quinn. Did I say good morning to you already? I might have. I don't remember. I want to make sure. Delightful. Any questions about the process of basting? Now, I specifically described this being on the floor. I know that that is not accessible to everyone. So for the sake of making sure that we discuss some other options, especially with aerosol spray based, you can baste on the design wall or you can baste on a table. I have a video on my blog. If you go search Spray Baste on the blog, you will, of course, find homemade Spray Baste, the recipe, and I'll throw these up into my stories after this too. You'll, of course, find homemade Spray Baste, but you'll also find a demo of me basting on the wall. The Star Island quilt that we're making together is probably about the largest that I can comfortably baste on a wall before it just gets to be a pain because it's big and it starts to get heavy and it's hard to keep on the wall. But you can absolutely baste on the vertical. So I do it the exact same way. I put the batting up first. I will often put a couple of pins at the top just so the weight of the thing doesn't pull it off the wall. Spray, smooth, start in the middle and work out as though it is paper on a bulletin board, right? Flip the whole thing over, same thing. I'll pin it at the top so the weight doesn't pull it off the wall. And like, don't overthink this pinning. Like literally just like stab it with some straight pins at the top, right? And then put the top on, okay? So you can baste vertically. With both aerosol spray based and homemade spray based, you can work in sections on a big table or on your kitchen counter, right? So, get a tablecloth maybe and put it over your dining room table so that the alcohol from homemade spray based doesn't affect the finish of your wood furniture, please. But then you can work in sections basting on the flat of the tabletop. And if you're working with homemade spray base, you'll just let it dry in between sections. And that's a little more time consuming, but it means that you can work from a standing position rather than having to get all the way down to the floor. Okay. Great questions. Quinn says, how am I feeling? So much better, y'all. I was unwell Sunday and Monday. I started not feeling well on Saturday and started getting some of those telltale signs that I was like, I have brought an unintentional souvenir home from H&H, along with like a couple dozen of my quilting friends, right? We all got it. By Monday night, like Sunday, John had to drive me to the doctor because I could barely sit up. I couldn't really sit up even most of Monday, but by Monday evening, I rallied enough because I did get Paxlovid. So I was on the meds long enough at that point that I could drive myself to the doctor. And bless my doc, he was like, here's the deal. Like, I need you to get moving. He was like, you're going to feel better if we can kind of flush things out of your body. So anyway, I took a little bit of a Peloton ride Monday night and it like put the life back in me. So I woke up yesterday feeling much better. I needed that circulation, that extra hydration. And so yesterday I really turned a corner. So I'm feeling much better. Thank you. Today, I would say I'm like probably 85% normal. I still feel like a little tired and not quite there, but I'm getting there really fast. So yay. All right. Let's take one more moment. I know I mentioned the quilt blocks at the very beginning, and then I jumped all the way to basting. I do want to talk about actually layout and assembly on the quilt, but I see another great question. Stitching Ma'am says, when I spray basted, it was really wet. Did I spray too much? When I missed it, it didn't seem to hold well. Any advice? It's going to be wet. It's going to be like a little bit of a soggy situation here, and that's normal, right? Because what we're essentially doing is gluing those layers together, but we had to heavily dilute that glue in order to spray it on with a spray bottle. So that's why I usually let it dry overnight. So if I'm using a homemade spray base, I will spray and put the backing on, let it dry overnight. And then the next morning I will flip it, spray and baste to the top and let it dry all day. And then maybe that evening I'll be able to quilt. Keep in mind though, I live in Georgia. Our humidity is like swimming pool at all times. So if you live in a dry climate, you may be able to allow it to just dry for a few hours, right? It just needs to be thoroughly dry to the touch. You don't want it to be soggy on the inside anywhere, right? So it sounds like you did it exactly right. If you don't spray it enough, it won't hold because you have to get, I'm about to use like weird science words, but you have to get enough of that particulate matter, right? You have to get enough of the flour and the salt, like the part that's actually going to glue it together into the fibers for it to work. So if you don't spray enough, it's not going to stick. Yeah, great question. Hello, Candace. It is good to see you. Hello, hello. Katie, how are you? Katie Zom from Zomco just joined the chat, y'all. And if you are not on her newsletter, you should be because she started showing sneak peeks of her next pattern and it's very good. Okay. All right, speaking of patterns and layouts, one last note on this. This is also one of those things that's open for interpretation. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I wrote it in the pattern. If you want to do it differently, you have, dealer's choice on this, right? But keep in mind when you're laying these out that the way the pattern is written, you actually alternate them. So your points go different directions. So as you're assembling, so see how like my teals are pointing vertically on one and horizontally on the other? Don't forget to alternate them as you put these together, okay? If you want to make them all going the same way, that's totally fine. I think it makes it look more twinkly to go this way, okay? So if you, like me, are on the crunch to get these assembled, I'm gonna let us all get back to our stitching. Hopefully that shed a little bit of light on the basting process. I have a number of resources on my blog that, like I mentioned, I'm gonna go put up in my stories over on Instagram. Those of you who are on YouTube, make sure that you follow the link to the Star Island Quilt Along, and there are resources linked from there. And I am so excited to be joining y'all tonight and actually show y'all how I'm going to custom quilt this quilt. I have previewed the quilting plan. That's in my Instagram stories and on my Instagram feed. We've got the signups available. It's $27 to join tonight. It's going to be a 2-hour live masterclass. So I'm going to open with about 30 minutes talking about how I drew this quilting plan, why I think this quilting plan is a good fit for the Star Island quilt, my process around drawing quilting plans. We have a resource that if you're new to quilting plans, we have a resource that will provide you, because I'm not going to start at ground zero, because a lot of the folks who are going to be joining us this evening are more advanced in their quilting plan making. So we'll jump straight in on this Star Island one, how I made this quilting plan. Then I'm going to jump into quilting on the quilt. We will work on the ruler work and the free motion together. So I'll show y'all how I navigate around the quilt, the 2 different rulers that I'm using, the free motion motifs that I chose. And then I'll be able to answer your questions live about the process of making quilting plans, of executing this specific quilting plan, of navigating quilting a proper sized quilt on a domestic machine, and hopefully make that whole process feel much more accessible, but also very inspiring, so that you can also quilt your Star Island quilts. So if you have not already signed up for that, you can still join us. At YouTube, I'm going to drop a link in the chat again. Instagram, it's already up in my stories. So go get signed up. I would love to see you tonight. I'm really excited to be in the final steps of these gorgeous Star Island quilts. Katie's off to make homemade spray base for the first time. You got this, Katie. Hit me up in my DMs if you have any questions. I would love to help. Y'all have a fabulous rest of your day, and I will see you tonight. Bye for now.